We're here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network via Zoom right now with Michael Vittetoe, and we're going to talk some conservation practices. Michael, thank you for taking the time to visit with us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So, of course, we're talking on behalf of Nature Conservancy and the 4R Plus program. And tell us a little bit about your operation and what you do on your operation here going into 2021.
Yeah, so our operation, it's a multi-generation family farm, primarily corn and soybeans, about 1,400 acres plus or minus. We also have some confinement hogs, and I've got about 35 head of cattle. So we've got livestock, we've got row crops, a lot of no-till. Dad and Grandpa started no-tilling back in the 80s. So that, we've been doing some conservation type stuff for quite some time. And then the last 10 years kind of is when we've been ramping up cover crops more and more. The last 5 years especially, I would say. And going into 2021, we are right around 95% cover crops on all of our row crop acres. So that's a little overview.
Okay, and so, I mean, you said your grandfather and your dad have been doing it for quite some time. I mean, obviously, they had been seeing good results. It does take time to establish this kind of work of no-till or cover crops. I mean, what kind of results were they seeing and made them want to just keep continuing to build on that?
Right. So, I mean, the no-till thing, that goes all the way back into the 80s, and there's been a lot of talk on Washington County, where we're at here in the southeast part of Iowa, how there was a lot of innovation going on in this area at that time. And they were right in the middle of all that. And, some of the efficiencies that they were able to find with eliminating all those tillage passes and whatnot, I think that was a big factor in how that adoption came to fruition. And then they noticed, the erosion was a lot less severe on big rain events. But there came a point in time where we were noticing, we were still having quite a bit of erosion happen even on our no-till fields. And so that was when we kind of started playing with the cereal rye cover crops on our hillier ground where we had erosion issues and whatnot. And it's kind of evolved from there as we've learned how to apply that practice to some of our flat fields even, and how to manage it appropriately there.
Now, is cereal rye primarily the cover crop that you use, or do you adjust for different areas in the operation?
Yeah, so we're primarily cereal rye. Anything that's going in the fall after harvest is going to be rye. We've played a little bit with a couple other cereals like triticale. I think we could get some winter wheat in the mix, but from a logistics standpoint in the fall, we're all pretty busy with harvest and trying to get covers drilled and all the hog manure activities that we got going on as well. So only having one thing that we have to put in the tender to get into the drill is definitely a nice thing from a logistics standpoint. And so we just stick with rye for right now. So.
And you mentioned obviously that using the hog manure from the barns and stuff. Obviously, going to more of the natural way of doing fertilizers and nutrients and things like that. So, what kind of nutrient? I mean, are you having to do any kind of nutrient supplementing, or has it been pretty much taken care of, or has it been even just reduced quite a bit?
As far as things like P and K and that sort of thing, we're pretty much just relying on the hog manure. We put a little bit of sulfur in with our nitrogen on the planter. The nitrogen is the thing that we're still having to supplement, and that's just in front of our corn crop. We'll put out about 10 gallon of 32% nitrogen UAN with the corn planter, and then depending on how the weather is shaping up in the spring, we might go in and hit it with another little bit at side dress time as well. But that's essentially it, other than the hog manure. And we're playing around with different timings for the hog manure as well. One thing that we did in 2020 was delayed some planting on a field of corn until early June, and then we went in and side dressed hog manure on that with a tank, and that was utilizing the 60-inch row corn that some people have been playing with and whatnot. So we're just trying to figure out ways that we can be even more efficient with those manure nutrients, because obviously putting it on in the fall, there's a lot of time for loss and other bad things to happen. So we're trying to shore up those aspects of the manure and make it even more efficient.
All right. And so looking ahead for 2021, are there any plans for expansion? I know you said you're already at 95% roughly in your estimation, but are you looking at expansion, or are you looking at doing anything different, or what's your plans for 2021?
Yeah, I mean, as far as covers this fall, I think we'll probably try and get everything covered. The only reason we had a few acres not get covered was just logistics. I ran out of seed in the drill in a field that was quite a ways away from home, so we just kind of left some strips and figured that would be a good trial for us to kind of see what the regular no-till would look like in that field this year. So the goal is to cover everything again in 2021 here this fall, going into the 22 season. But yeah, I think the main thing we're working on moving forward is just how do we continue to reduce our herbicide rates and costs and whatnot, and that's something that we've had a lot of success with in the last couple of years. We barely used any residual herbicides at all on our soybean crop in 2020, and we had really clean fields, really. So that's one thing that we're finding we're getting a lot of benefit from these cover crops with, is just reduced herbicide. We're going in and delaying termination on our rye, and there's literally hardly any weeds to be found out in the field, even at post spray time. So continuing to figure out how all of that stuff kind of works together and keeping the crop yields up while we're still trying to push the limit on those types of things is kind of where our attention's focused at this point in time.
So out and around Washington County and where you're located, are you seeing quite a bit of adoption of this, or is there room for improvement among other farmers to really get in the game with cover crops?
Yeah, I mean, Washington County is great in the grand scheme of things. There's a lot of fields that have cover crops on them now that didn't 5 years ago, ours included. And then more and more producers are starting to at least play with it a little bit, how we would have been maybe 10 years ago, or and everything in between. So there's definitely an increased utilization of cover crops in the area that I've noticed in the last few years. Obviously, there's still room to improve. I don't think we're anywhere even close to half of the acres in the county being covered yet, which I think that's something that we could push towards, is trying to get more and more acres covered every year as far as every operation. But yeah, I think things are still trending up in this area as far as what's getting covered every year. And then some of the neighboring counties are starting to utilize some of those practices as well. I know Louisa County uses a lot of cover crops as well. They're just next door to the east. So we're seeing more and more of it across the countryside.
All right. Well, Michael, if you were going to talk to farmers out there, or give a message to farmers out there, to those who aren't utilizing cover crops or not utilizing it that much, or maybe on the fence about it, I mean, what kind of thing would you tell them that really drives home the importance and what you've seen that's a good way, a good incentive for them to at least try it?
Yeah. I guess the number one thing that I always focus on is erosion control. Anything we can do to keep our soil in our fields and where it was formed. Anything we can do to maintain all of that is going to be a beneficial thing in the long run on our operations. It's hard to put a dollar value on that, just because it's something that you're not necessarily paying $100 an acre or $10 an acre or whatever you want to put towards erosion. You're not paying that every year out of your pocket. It might be happening, but you're not actually paying for it out of your bank account. Whereas to put a cover crop out there, you're actually paying for it. So figuring out a way to make it pencil and pay for itself is what's important. And that's where we've been focusing on the ways that we can reduce our pesticide usage and that sort of thing. And we're already above and beyond covering the cost of the cover crop just by utilizing less pesticides on our fields. So that's how we're making it pencil out on our operation. And then we're getting into some other things that we're figuring out as far as how to manage moisture in some of our fields. We've got some really heavy fields, flat and black, that have wet areas and drainage issues and whatnot. And what we're finding is the rye is able to grow moisture out of those fields that we wouldn't be able to we wouldn't be able to get rid of. We would need to be putting in more tile and all that sort of thing in order to manage that moisture. Whereas once we're planting the cover crops in all of those fields, we're able to actively manage moisture in these fields with a growing crop ahead of our cash crop. So that's the one thing that I've really kind of picked up on is just the management flexibility that we get by utilizing the cover crop, being able to actively manage excess water and that sort of thing that you might not think about until you start actually playing with it and going out and utilizing it in your fields and seeing what changes it's making on your operation.
All right. Well, Michael, I thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today and tell us about the cover crops, and good luck here on the 2021 growing season.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You have a good day.
That's Michael Vittetoe. He is a Washington County farmer here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.